Welcome back to another episode of Radiant Others, a podcast about klezmer music and all of the radiant others we can find out in the world. I think we're all radiant others in some way and to somebody. My name's Dan Blacksburg. I'm a klezmer trombonist, educator. I also play lots of other styles of music and do lots of other musical-related things besides just play the trombone, including this podcast, which I record, as always, from my West Philly basement. For all of us returning listeners, it's really good to have you with us. For anybody who's new checking us out, welcome, and I'm glad to have you here. Today, we continue our exploration of the UK klezmer scene and some of the people who are making music today and have been making music for a long time. So this episode features violinist, festival organizer, teacher, producer of klezmer books and educational materials, Ilana Cravitz. Ilana is a violinist who specializes in klezmer and also in Baroque historical performance, and she's just one of the leading folks on the UK klezmer scene and has been for as long as I've been aware of it. She talks about having come up at a time where she learned from people like Merlin Shepherd, who was one of my first teachers at Klez Camp, and gifts us just a whole slew of stories and experiences across her whole career, ranging from teaching in really interesting locations or to really interesting groups of people, to playing all over the place, to creating klezmer ceilidhs, these kind of new hybrid dance parties that she and Guy Shalom used to do. Like, it's just a classic old school Radiant Others episode. We don't have some big topic we're covering. We're just sharing our stories, telling you all who Ilana is and all the really cool stuff she's done, and hopefully some stuff that she is on her way to putting out. There's a lot of really good stuff in here, and it was great to finally get to really hang with her. As I joke in the beginning, usually the trombonists and the violinists don't really get a chance to spend a lot of time together. Certainly we don't get to play together. So this was just a real treat to be able to sit down with Ilana for a whole long while after knowing each other closely or less closely for a really long time. I enjoyed the heck out of it, and I hope you will too. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy the work we do on the Radiant Others Klezmer podcast. We are always asking you for more and more support, mostly because we ask a lot, and it kind of stays the same. Everybody who donates, we're so grateful. It's expensive to run a podcast. I mean, it's not the most expensive thing, but we're so grateful. I'm so grateful for everything that the people who donate give us to help make this happen, to help me pay Bela Unger a good wage for their work, and to keep the podcast feed running on our hosting site or whatever. So you know the drill, patreon.com/radiantothers, tiptopjar.com/radiantothers. Give us all of your remaining available money after you've taken care of all of the other things that are so important in this world that need money. And basically that's it. I will see you on the other side, so please enjoy my conversation with Ilana Cravitz. Welcome back to another episode of Radiant Others, the Klezmer and More podcast. And I'm really excited to be here with UK's klezmer violin mover and shaker, the person who makes things happen, Ilana Cravitz.
You're so kind, Dan. You're so kind. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, it's so great. You know, I was thinking about how different scenes in this klezmer scene, in this klezmer world, sometimes feel a little bit more distant than they even are geographically. And for me, unfortunately, the UK scene has been a little bit separate. So, and also there's the situation where you play violin, I play trombone. If in fact we are teaching at the same festival, they make sure that we're on opposite sides of the building so we can't hear each other. And, it's understandable, but it's always sad. So I never really get to know the violinists quite as well. And, but yeah, I was just thinking it would be really great to talk. We've had some other folks from the British scene on. We had Fran and Flora. We had Anna Lowenstein on a recent episode talking about her new album. And I was like, okay, but we got to go back to like the person who's really made a lot of things happen as far as I can tell. And I also know in my own experience, you've made a lot of things happen. That's you, Ilana. So yeah, I was going to say, you've been doing this klezmer thing for like a while now.
It feels like it, but in a good way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It started quite a long way back, actually. I think one of my first experiences was just hearing klezmer in the street. I mean, I'm not going to take you through my whole birth, marriage, divorce, whatever, but with klezmer. There's been no divorce yet. But it certainly sort of took me quite early when I heard it in the street and sort of managed to find Merlin and a few other people in the UK who were doing it in the 90s. And then I actually came to Kles Camp really quite early on and took a class, with Alicia, took some other classes, got together with Merlin briefly in the UK to do some playing. And he said, go away, listen to all these scratchy recordings on the cassettes from Kurt. And that was the beginning, the usual pathway really in a way.
Yeah, it really was the usual pathway back then. And so, was this the 90s? This is the early mid-90s?
Yeah.
So, my understanding is like this is when Kles Camp, which I guess had been around, let's say, for approximately 10 years, give or take a couple years, and I'm sure, and because it started in 85, and you have people like Merlin Shepherd, who also was really central to Kles Camp in 2002 when I started and was like one of my first guys who got me really excited. Teaching clarinet, you still had maybe Sid Beckerman was there, maybe Howie Leese was there. Then you had people like Alicia who were, of a younger generation kicking ass. And it's, from what I understand, these programs were gigantic and really packed, and like there were a lot of people, and there was just an unbelievable amount of excitement back then. I mean, there's still a lot of excitement, but that this was real. There was this, my sense in perspective, like hindsight, is that this is a real heyday.
Yeah, we were all packed into that hotel in the Catskills. It was snowing outside. It was dry as hell inside. We all got sick, but there was something magical about the whole experience, and the fact that there was kids programs, there was paper cutting, there was Jenny Romain doing theatre. There was just a real buzz about the whole thing, and every corner that you were in, you'd meet somebody and do some jamming, and you just didn't go to bed. It was up all night. There was some dancing. I remember doing a one-person, playing for the Cher, and there was a whole Cher set. There was me. There was somebody on percussion. I can't remember who, and we just got on with it,
Yeah, it was just a real, like the fires were lit, and the soup was bubbling. I think that's it really still felt that way when I came in a couple, about 6-7 years later. And had you ever experienced, I was going to say something really funny is that recently I was writing about Kles Camp, and I was asked, well, did it really burn down? And I found on YouTube these guys who go through abandoned buildings, and I found an entire a video of them walking through the burned out Paramount Hotel, and it's in shambles for sure, but it sounds like not all of it burned down, but the important parts did.
Yeah, no way. I can't believe you found that.
Yeah, it was really funny, this internet we live on. But yeah, I was thinking I certainly had never experienced music as part of something, as part of everything, as part of culture, as a part of living, just a day-to-day living that I did back then. And, I'm assuming you came, so you came there as a young adult, and you did you have a career? Had you ever experienced anything like this before? How did it strike you compared to the way that you kind of thought of music in your life at the time?
Well, I'd come from doing classical music, and then I got into Baroque music, which is a whole scene in itself, and it's quite,
Sure.
it has the same sort of nerdiness to it. People are really into detail. The whole historically informed perspective thing comes from probably the Baroque movement. So I'd experienced that kind of thing, but to have something within the Jewish musical thing where there was a whole culture around it, and there was a whole queer culture, which was great for me as well.
For sure.
Which was very visible at that time in the Klezkamp community as well. And we had a whole, chavurah for the queer folk there. And so coming to that, there was a small gathering of the community in the UK, musical gathering in Sheffield, I seem to remember, shortly after I started playing, discovering what was happening. But it was nothing compared to this. And I just felt like there was I could really express my Jewish identity, having come from a secular background. It came through sort of mainly through political identification, left-wing political identification, through my family background, and through
very Jewish,
and the historical thing about where my family had come from and the family stories, and both my grandfathers had been brought up from. So we occasionally would say, "Oh, can we do Pesach this year?" And they'd, put on an event. So there was a lot of Jewishness and Yiddishkeit in a way, but not a lot of religion, and not a synagogue, apart from when my sister decided to have a religious phase and go to one of the liberal synagogues for a year or so. So it really gave me a kind of home in being Jewish and identifying through music, and this whole community that was so passionate about the music and other Yiddish things around the music.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I'm really glad that you said that phrase, Jewishness, and how you connect that to your own story of, growing up secular, where like Pesach is like a special treat, it's something that you do, and you even called it a performance, which is also really beautiful. Like, I love thinking about it that way, because it's always yes and when it comes to all this stuff. I was recently reading this essay. There's this new anarchist Jewish zine that was published in the U.S. called Circle Aleph, I think, and it's really cool. Recommended. And there's a great essay by Yiddish music community person Daniel Rosa Langlevitsky, which really puts Jewishness in contrast with Judaism, and whereas like Judaism is like structures and rules and hierarchies. And, you can quibble this, but we're on a podcast. This is my podcast. So, so structures and hierarchies, whereas Jewishness is people and folk practices and, I don't know, fancy word, but emergent ideas about how to deal with the present from the past. And I just feel like it's such a good frame for what this Klezkamp, especially at its heyday, and all the other places that have come. And I want to hear totally about all the work you've done with your own festivals and stuff like that. But this frame of Jewishness is this kind of emergent quality of people kind of coming together because they want to be there, because they have to be there. So, and I like that you mentioned Baroque stuff. Historically informed performance certainly shares their nerdiness and the looking backwards to look forwards kind of thing that we have. And I think what they don't get to have as often is a sense of, it's not rooted in a specific people's culture like Jewishness. But even if you weren't Jewish and playing this music, there's a community aspect to it. And because it's dance music, it's a community service aspect to it. Even when you're playing the music for a concert or something, rooted in there is some kind of community service. And so, I could imagine, I've often thought that coming from a Baroque background might prepare an instrumentalist to play klezmer more than like, say, a jazz or a straight, romantic, post-romantic classical background. What was it like diving into these, all the elements of this music? You said you had the Kurt Björling tapes. He must have cleaned up on those tapes back in the day, I'm telling you.
Oh, he must have become a rich man. I see that in the way he lives.
Let's hope
he's rich, and let's hope it's because of music. We can only hope. But he and his partner, I hope they're still cultivating monarch butterflies. They were doing that the last time I saw them, like 10 years ago.
Last time I was on Zoom with him, he was like one landed on his shoulder, I think. So yeah, probably.
Kurt Bjorling, we'll have on someday. It's going to be a 5-hour episode, and he's going to tell us everything you've ever needed and didn't need to know about klezmer, and we're going to love it so deeply. So, props and gratefulness. But yeah, like, what were some of the, I like to ask, like, what are some of the excitements? What were some of the big wins? What were some of the big challenges for you? Either like challenge, like that was really hard, or like, wow, that really challenged my sense of myself or my career or whatever, as you were really entering this music. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how it started to become part of your professional life.
Yeah, I mean, I was also doing other things that weren't music. So I had a professional life that was working in non-profit organizations, doing PR, doing marketing, doing campaigning. And they tended to be kind of campaigning organizations. So environment, human rights, women's rights, that kind of thing. And I was balancing up the music with that. And when I was, so I started with the klezmer sort of in my mid to late 20s. And then I also went to, and I was constantly sort of, I'm changing jobs. Should I just take some time off and do some music and see how it goes? And then in my late 20s, I went to music college for a year. I went to the Royal College of Music and studied Baroque music.
Cool.
A postgrad sort of year. And then after that, I thought, right, well, that's it. I'm going to get into the profession now. And then I...
Yeah. You got the degree or a certificate. You're done. You got it.
I had the ology, and I also got into
I thought that's how it worked, too.
I got into the European Union Baroque Orchestra.
Well, that's really cool.
Which did touring, and it was supposed to be a bridge between college and the profession. And I did a couple of kind of auditions playing to people after that, and was about to sort of get ensconced. But often happens with me, I have two things going on. There's my head, there's my heart, and there's something else. And part of me was saying, you need to go back to work. You need to go back and get another proper job, possibly so I could afford the instruments and the courses I wanted to go on to have more training. But
that's a materially reasonable situation. Yes.
So I did that at that point. But eventually, I kind of took off and thought, and never went back to work. The balance shifted in favor of the music. But you were asking about challenges and rewards and things. And I think that whole thing about getting really deep into the music, listening to the tapes, transcribing, playing, and, as we do, I describe it as like learning a language. If you really want to learn the language, you've got to learn the accent. You can't just read it off the page. You have to learn the accent and all that sort of thing. So there was a lot of that going on. And then in 2000, Geraldine Auerbach at the Jewish Music Institute declared that there was going to be a series, some money available for people. You could apply for money because it was the Millennium. It was called Millennium Awards. And the National Lottery in the UK had made money available for ethnic stuff, and so she'd got a pot of money which she then invited people to apply for. So people were applying to do composition. The band Shikoyach formed. They got some money to get some coaching from Merlin Shepherd to form a band and learn about klezmer. They actually started there. And I applied for some money to put together a string workshop. So I did some studying with Deborah. I did Deborah Strauss. I did some studying with Michael Alpert. And I put together a kind of pack for string players, and I did a couple of workshops. I think Zev Feldman and Michael Alpert were over here at one point, and I made them do a workshop with me for string players where we used gut strings. So I brought together the historical performance side, and
that's really sweet.
It was a really nice workshop, and some of those players came in and did some playing by ear and learned a bit about the klezmer tradition. So those kind of rewards were amazing, meeting people, getting really just stuck in and learning about how it all held together, if you like. But also the diversity, the fact that people have their own styles. You can listen as much as you want to the old recordings, but people are always bringing their own stuff. And I think one of the hard things for me, possibly to this day, has been kind of accepting that people play things in different ways to the way I hear things and the way I do it myself. And, I always have respect for those people, but I don't always like what they do. And I find that quite challenging. So that's an interesting side of things, that you say, well, here's the way I do it. And people go, yeah, but, that sounds wrong. Or there's I
remember.
There can be judgment, can't there? There can be judgment.
Yeah. And I remember, like, let's say someone like Pete Socolow, who had a very, very, very specific experience of this music that was, there's that term from academic Jeffrey Chandler of post-vernacular, like the idea that this exists sort of beyond the confine, like, the boundaries of, I don't know, community where people don't really think about what they're doing. They're just living their lives. Maybe that's a good way to put it. And, that was his experience playing this music. So then people come along. And I remember hearing great stories about, someone like Josh Horowitz and Merlin Shepard and Bob Cohen coming in with having done a lot of research about Eastern European fiddle styles, coming up with bands like Budowitz, and Pete, who has the most claim of any person to this musical tradition, goes, that's not it. And you're like, well, yeah, it's a yes and thing. Like, that is not it. So I do think that, when I started, I do feel like there was a strong sense of do this, not that. And some of that is just definitely how you carve a place for yourself, right? Because you have to, if you love it so much, what's going to make you stay is finding a place for yourself. And sometimes you have to do that in opposition. Sometimes you can do that in whatever the opposite of opposite, confluence with people. But yeah, I mean, we were all into playing soft. I remember when Michael Winograd and I were like 24, we were like, we're going to play soft. We're going to play really soft klezmer music from the Baragovsky collection. Like, no one had ever done that before. And although weirdly, I don't know if anybody had done it on the trombone. So pat myself on the, brush my shoulder or whatever. But, and now we're like Mr. American. We're like Mr.'s American. And like, I don't know. I just think there's a bigger picture where you can go, oh, that's not that. But I'm looking at it from an even broader vantage point. And so it's like you can have that kind of rejectionist mentality over it without rejecting people. Because that would be my dream. And it sounds like you've always been sort of turning your own study of this right around and teaching a lot of people and trying to share it, really share it in a lot of ways. Is that like, how did that come about? Was that from you? I could see some connections from what I know, but.
I'm not a trained teacher or anything like that, but yeah, it seemed like getting it out there. And in a way, if you want other people to play with, to some extent, you do have to get out there and teach people so that you get a pool of people who you can work with to some extent.
For sure.
And the next generation.
Yeah, whatever that means. It's so funny how musical generations work, because sometimes it's by age and sometimes it isn't,
No, that's absolutely true. But I feel that certainly in the UK, that the push to get younger people involved isn't there at an official level, if you want to say there is an official level. So I feel that it's a shame, because the way we do things, the fact that we're quite folky, we generally play without music, we learn by ear, we understand the genre and we kind of assimilate that way. There's not that many young people that are coming in that way, and I think that there is a lot of space to introduce that. And there's folk music among young people is really enjoying a revival here. And I was just at a weekend where I was talking to people about that. It was actually a French music weekend.
Cool.
Anglo-French, if you like, with Blowsabella, the band that's been around for a long, long time. And so I've been trying to do some of that. And we have a different scene in the UK where it's not necessarily so much synagogue based. If you're trying to get kids involved, you might, the Jewish music scene is very, very different from the US Jewish music scene. So you might be
Yeah.
looking to get kids who are just doing music in general, rather than you go to a synagogue and say, give me all your kids, because not that many synagogues have a lot of kids over
Oh,
here.
well, there
We're
you go.
a very
Yeah,
small
I mean,
community.
I don't. Well, I do have my one synagogue that gives me all of their people
Yeah.
and more.
Yeah.
But that's very specific to our West Philly queerdo bubble, as they say. And yeah, it's so. As you were starting to learn this, when did you start? Where? I mean, did you get to play with Merlin once you had studied the tapes, or like, were you? Because like when I started, I really started as a sideman, which is a very trombone thing to do, and I didn't literally work my way up through the ranks because there were no ranks and there was no working sometimes, but that for instance, for me, the joke is that I actually didn't know the melodies of most of these tunes for a really long time because I was just accompanying them so hard that I could do it sort of subconscious. Like I knew the melodies sort of subconsciously, but it took much later. But yeah, did you get to play with existing projects or with existing things, or did you really have to? I mean, you're shaking your head, so I'm assuming you really had to like start your own things.
Well, basically, there wasn't much going on here. Merlin generally played abroad. He was playing in Europe and in the US mainly because there wasn't anybody to play with in the UK at that point. There'd been one small band called Reuters Klezmoras, which was 3 women who were involved with the Jewish Socialists, and it's sort of an offshoot of that. And
That's
then
sweet.
there was what was happening in Sheffield, which was a guy called Ray Cohen who was doing some transcribing. He played fiddle, and he got a few people, and they played the arrangements that he transcribed. And then there was Merlin, who was he was playing with Burning Bush, Lucy's Keeping in the Burning Bush, and they played Jewish music. So it was a real melange of different types of Jewish music. And he was kind of like the klezmer guru who put his stamp onto the fact that it sounded really klezmery, the klezmer stuff they did. But they didn't do very much, and it was very much standards. And that was really all that was happening. So I think the first klezmer band I got involved in was, I was invited to join. It was a Yiddish singer, and she was playing with an oboe and maybe a trombone, I think, and a couple of saxophones. And the band was called...
That's an incredible lineup.
It was a great lineup, and it was called Freilich, and we changed it to Freilich Klezmer Dance Band, and it was all women. And so awesome. I joined as a fiddler, very much green, and we did really funky arrangements. It was a really great band, and that was my main sort of klezmer playing until we formed the London Klezmer Quartet, which was around about 2008, which grew out of the Klez Fest in the UK.
Oh wow, yeah, I would have. So it sounds like there's a lot of ways in which both of our stories kind of temporally dovetail, even though geographically we never, got to hang out. But yeah, I can remember, I would always see Merlin at Klez Camp. And I had an opportunity to play shows with Frank London, in the mid 2000s, and he would be there often. And it just reminds me that there was money to travel. I also remember that the hotel rooms were swankier than they became later. And I don't know, maybe people just maybe you could just get these corporate deals and people would just give these things away. I don't know what the deal was, but things changed. But yeah, so when you started doing your own thing, what were because that was a couple years. Like, it's not like, yeah, you got to play a bunch of gigs and stuff for a couple of years, and then 2008 is like a while. I mean, you've already doing this for over a decade, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe it was kind of more on the side. It's hard to think back and imagine. I think I was doing quite a lot of workshops, and every year we had Klez Fest in the UK from 2000 onwards. And so I would have been teaching there. I think I taught a bit in France at and I came to Klez Camp as it was sporadically from time to time. So it's hard to remember, Dan. And of course, there was the Klezmer Cruise in 2007. I went on as a kind of side person, and that was quite the experience. And I was already interested in Berezovsky by that point. because I was trying to get into the archive. I remember trying to get into the archive and talking to Josh Dolgin, whose family organised the klezmer cruise. The idea was that we were going from Kiev down to Odessa on a boat and stopping off at Jewish sites of interest on the way, and there would be a band, a kind of house band, that was playing both on the ship and not on the ship. And so that was, kind of roots-based experience, except my family don't come from Ukraine. But it was the most incredible way of understanding more about the country and the people and what was going on there and all that sort of thing. And, of course, meeting all the amazing people who went. So, yeah.
I remember when that happened, and it was sort of when, let's say the founders. I know it was Josh is from Canada. Klez Canada is very, and his family are very like connected. And I remember it was like a real high-end Sandy, High Goldman, kind of like Friends thing. So there's probably a lot of that. And yeah, it's so funny because to me, when I think back on it, my brain goes, well, you were like, oh, the klezmer cruise. I've been doing klezmer. And you're like, oh, that was 2007. I'd been playing klezmer for 5 years, only 2 years professionally. And I was like, ho, 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 ho. And what hubris. That's pretty hysterical. Now it's 2026. That was almost 20 years ago.
Oh, my God. It feels like yesterday, Dan. Feels like yesterday.
Well, that's good. You remember it really well. But yeah, so things were... It's the thing that's striking me right now is that you're both sort of saying, yeah, I'm doing it part-time. Yeah, I'm doing this. And at the same time, it sounds like there was so much to do.
Well, yeah, actually, I'm being unfair to myself possibly because the other thing was that I was working with Guy Shalom, the drummer and dancer, on the Hop Color Productions side of things. So what we did was put together a thing where we did what we called in this country klezmer Kaylee, which was like klezmer barn dance, and marketed that. So we managed to infiltrate Cecil Sharp House, the home of English folk dance, and have a massive annual klezmer Kaylee there where we had like 150 people dancing. And I'd lead the band and Guy would lead the dancing. And we were doing sort of smaller events around that as well, and sometimes doing weddings. It's become more of a thing now that people would like that for their weddings as the whole Yiddish dance movement has flourished in connection with the music, and we've all started understanding more about what we need for what and how to lead it. And I took on the role of the dance leader in various bands, as fiddlers seem often to do.
Someone's got to listen. I've done that too, and it's been a little more awkward, I would imagine. But it's so interesting that. So you're teaching, and then you start playing weddings. I mean, playing weddings is its own music business, it's like separate from everything else. I mean, if you become a professional musician, you'll meet people who only play weddings, and some of them don't even seem to like music that much. They just play weddings. And you're like, how do you do this? Yeah. I mean, and fair enough. Sometimes you work about as much as a job.
I felt conflicted, not conflicted, but, there's a duality about it, isn't it? It's like, this is what this music is actually for. You are supposed to be there playing for the simcha. You're supposed to be, giving them the experience and accompanying every step of that journey. And when it works that way, it's amazing. But sometimes it's just like play for the dancing, and then you're just background, and you might get a packet of crisps and a sandwich if you're lucky. But that's another issue.
Yes,
that we
the
can
dreaded
talk about.
bandwich. Yes.
Yes.
The dreaded bandwich. That's terrible.
But
Sometimes
I
it's just
felt that it was interesting to me, the difference between the concert stage and the dance event and the wedding, because they all require different aspects of musicianship. So when you're trying to entertain an audience that's sitting down, you want to give them some more interesting arrangements. You want to show the variety of the music so they don't get bored and leave in the interval. You want to give them some background. There's a lot of patter in the gigs I do, where I talk about the musicians, the experiences, the history, all that kind of thing, to give the cultural experience, because a lot of audiences in the UK have no idea.
Right.
And whereas at the wedding, you're kind of, doing the dancing, and you're in the background being stepped on, and then again, the dance events, people just want the beat, they love the music, but they're not really there for that. They're there to do the dancing, so the band has to be on it as a dance band, and providing that proper dance experience.
Yeah, I love that. I love that it's like 3 genres of music as opposed to like klezmer, Latin, Balkan. No, it's actually concert stage, folk dance event, and like simcha or wedding. And that is one thing that I struggle to figure out how to get the young people who are coming to me trying to figure out how to, it is different. You have to play differently, and you kind of have to, there's so much crossover. Like, don't worry about it. Like, you can, the more, only the most staid concert musicians won't be able to use some of that information in these other things. But yeah, to be able to give people that kind of breadth of the opportunity. And because usually it's like, I don't know, people fall into all these different sort of categories of things that there's sort of these pitfalls. One pitfall would be that you learned all your klezmer tunes from sheet music and you really don't know the recordings at all. And so you play it in a very specific way. And worse for me, and this is my own opinion, but worse for me is when you start building on the sheet music, like let's say an arrangement or, with counterlines or harmonies that actually wouldn't make sense if you heard it. Other things could make sense. Like the impulse is great, make music new, but it's just you're using sort of a seriously flawed source. And then like another pitfall would be, again, and this doesn't really happen in the US because most people learn to play klezmer in some sort of party environment first, or at least experience it as party music or think of it as party music. But I've experienced some other places where it's mostly, they mostly experience it as concert music, and people have a hard time. I think it was basically the same thing. People start building on that sound, but it's just like, it's like you're building a recipe, but you're missing some really basic flavors.
Yeah, totally. And in the UK, actually, in the folk scene, most people now know a klezmer tune, and they probably have learnt it from sheet music or from somebody who has learnt it from sheet music. So it'll come up in the session. I'll be like, oh, I think I know that tune. Oh my God, it's, X. What have they done to it? And then you say to people, would you like to come to a workshop and learn something more about klezmer? Yeah.
We'll teach you to cook with garlic and chicken fat.
Absolutely.
Right now you're using like soybean oil and like not enough salt, And
there are professional musicians who have klezmer bands in this country for whom it's very similar. They play certain tunes that they've obviously never heard the original source recording for in a certain way, and it's their choice, and that's absolutely fine. But it's not what I would choose.
No, it's this is disparaging because it is. What I'll say is this is disparaging. So no offense, but maybe a little bit. But it's it's like people who play klezmer music versus people who play klezmer tunes. And there are people in Philly. You're like, oh, have you played with so and so? Yeah, of course. Yeah, they've played a lot of klezmer tunes. It's not a terribly nice thing I say, but it at least orients the people who I'm talking to. And what's interesting is meeting younger people, and I want to think about KlezFest and how that matters for you, but then also how you matter to it there are a lot of young people. So fast forward to let's say the last 8-10 years, there's not money for someone like Merlin Shepherd to be bopping around all the world, playing klezmer gigs with all these people, making probably still not enough money, but certainly a living. And there's not enough. I don't go to Europe nearly as often as I did when I was 24, which is hysterical. I'm 42 now. Mm-hmm. And so the people who are coming into the music that I encounter are really there because it speaks to them on everything except a professional level. A lot of them, in fact, are older and getting their careers, like figuring out how to become music, like kind of the thing you were saying in your late 20s about your job and stuff like that, 5-6 years older than when you were, which I think makes a huge difference in your life, but the kinds of flexibilities you have, the choices you have. And so, I feel a lot of, and I'm the opposite. I got dragged in right away. I was on stage, in the big stages when I was like 22, very, very lucky, obviously played my ass off on some level, but, there's still a maturity that I appreciate about now, regardless of those experiences. So I'm really trying to respect and encourage that. But it is really interesting that they don't have that. Like, for instance, people come in now and they learn by ear, they learn from teachers, and they don't know the complete klezmer book repertoire, for instance. Because that's just this book that's honestly kind of associated with the 90s and the early 2000s. It is a klezmer canon. It certainly was back then, honestly. If it was I'd be learn all those tunes. But nowadays, we just had a concert here with Rebecca Mack's string band and a new band that's mostly people who I've spent a lot of time with, and the clarinetist Zimmel Adler, Zimmel and the Philly Schmearcats, which I appreciate the name, and I missed the concert unfortunately because we were all sick, but I don't think they're playing that repertoire very much. That American 90s repertoire, the Sid Beckerman, Pete Socolo kind of stuff, the complete klezmer stuff, and then you'll always have a band that goes, oh, my favorite klezmer tune is Odessa Bulgar. And when we do the Kurt Bjorling episode, an hour of the podcast will be dedicated just to him ranting about that one.
Yes, Odessa is a dumb tune. That's the classic Kurt quote.
He truly despises it, but he's still obsessed with it because he can't stop talking about it. Yeah, it's just, so thinking about Klezfest, so these different kinds of categories of musicianship, you're always kind of trying to bring more people in. And so maybe before we get to Klezfest, but as you were starting to really work, who were your close collaborators? Who were the people who you found or who you came up with together, who you were able to really lean on and kind of create this life that you were creating?
Well, I did. I seem to be a compulsive band former, actually, because I did form a band after Freilich. My next band was actually called Verschließ deine Töchter, Lock Up Your Daughters, because it was two straight guys and two lesbians. So so we called it FDT Klezmorim. And
that's good.
So it was me on fiddle, Susie Evans on clarinet, Jim Markovich, the late great Jim Markovich on accordion. He was a UK accordionist, very devoted to klezmer, who died very young. He was 35. 35, maybe even a little younger. And Guy Shalom on drums. And this was a really incredible sort of, professional band for me to be playing with. And we did a couple of tours, and we branched out, and Guy and I, as part of the Hopkler thing, brought Susan Watts over, and
awesome.
With Sana Morica from Germany, and we did a tour with some UK musicians and those musicians. So we were constantly trying to sort of take klezmer out. And the Jewish Music Institute, which did Klezfest, was sometimes supportive of some of the stuff we did. They formed something called the Klezmer Caravan, where we went to Scotland before Michael Alper moved there. And we were in Aberdeen doing some stuff up there with the university students and having a gig, and with different musicians. So there was a coterie of sort of some musicians who were really into it. And a little later along came Francesca de Berg, I know is a good friend of yours, and she's younger.
Yeah.
And I actually taught her and her sisters at one of the early Klez Fest when they were just getting into it. She was still at university. Her little sisters were still, little.
Yeah.
So yeah, things sort of evolved, and it was a very exciting time. Now you're making me remember these things, Dan. I didn't make enough notes, obviously, before I started talking to you, but it's all coming back to me now. And people were facilitating. Vivi Lax's sister, Ruti, is a songwriter, and she plays accordion and trombone again. Here we are with the trombone. And she brought us to Ireland to do a little tour there with FD2. So we were playing in rural Southern Ireland in places like, there was a cookery school, which was amazing. They paid us in rooms and cream teas and cheese.
Honestly, you can't do that every gig, but you should definitely do that every 40th gig.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, you saying you want maybe people to come away with a realistic idea of what's involved. One of the realistic things is that certainly in the UK, you make much more from weddings than you do from concerts.
Oh, that's same here.
Yeah, so you really love doing the concerts, and you can display your artistry and get people to, through the doors, and they love the music, and they might even start playing it, and they buy the CDs, which helps to support the band. But it's really the private functions that are paying the bills.
So you were a professional musician in the era when CDs were sold.
Listen,
and people bought them.
I'm still selling CDs. You can't believe it.
More, praise the Lord. Somebody's doing it. This is, I even forget to bring them most of the time. But, that's really, I keep thinking about how many different kind of streams of income there used to be, right? You could do a program, and that still happens, but all of this still happens. It's just much, much less. But, back in someday I really I'd love to know let me put it this way. There's this part in Mark Slobin's book, Fiddler on the Move, where he talks about, and this is written in 96 or something. So he's really ruminating on in a way, the first 2 decades of the klezmer revival, whatever we call it, but really in terms of its big outward push, the first 15 years, think of Klezmer Conservatory Band in 81, Klez Camp in 85, there was stuff happening before, but this is when it started something was happening. And he says, your average klezmer band can expect to sell 10 to 12,000 copies of their CD a year. And I was like, what are you talking about, man?
Never, surely never.
I've never even printed that many. And can you imagine if you had, I don't even know. Let's say you get it on a label and you have a crappy deal and you only make $1 per copy. What if your band had an extra 10 grand to work with? Well, for sure you'd make the next record. That's what everybody used to do. They go, oh, the record pays for the next record. That's not my experience, And, I don't know what to tell people anymore. I also don't know what to do myself. So I just work really slowly and do things on the very cheap. Some of which is because I know people from decades long relationships that allows me to do things at a lower cost, which is also not a transferable situation. That's I don't know. It's very interesting. Okay, so Klez Fest is the thing that I remember hearing about with the UK.
I can't believe you never came and taught at Klezfest.
There's just not enough trombone players. No, I've never been.
Who needs trombone players? We need you, Dan, not because of your trombone.
I'll do it.
Absolutely.
I'll do it for a good price. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, it's not running anymore. So yeah, but
damn it,
that's another story.
Well, okay, but this. It's so funny that because also so many things were called in Europe were called Klezfest, and all of them, the Klezfest St. Petersburg or Klezfests other in Russia, they all seem to have these massive impacts.
Yeah.
Of bringing people in. So you started going to Klezfest when it started in like 2000, I think you said, and that were you teaching or were you a student or somewhere in between?
I was, I think I was a student the first year, and then I became something in between over the next couple of years.
I remember that phase of my life too. Yeah. So, and then you were teaching, and then I saw on your website did you run it for a minute?
Yeah, I was the director. So when Geraldine Aubach, who started the Jewish Music Institute and started Klezfest because she loved klezmer and she really wanted to get it established, so she brought over loads of our friends to the UK to establish it. And when she left, the new people wanted to do something different, and they didn't want to do what she'd done, so they axed Klezfest, which seems to be a pattern now, I'm understanding.
Klezmer has this. Like the Jewish people themselves, sort of takes an overrepresented role in these kinds of discussions. You're like, hey, it's not going that well. Let's try to keep doing it for a little while.
I know. So, I mean, I tried to advise them that it would be very ill-advised to cut it because it was very popular, and that was one of the biggest, visibility things that they did and stuff, but they weren't interested. So in about 2015, they realized their mistake after about 5 years, and they asked me if I would help them resurrect it. So I was the artistic director for 2 years, and that sort of got it back up and running. It seems to be actually one of my roles in life, I realize these days, is to start festivals and then just sort of move on and start another one.
You're like the people who go and like jump cars. You like drive up with your battery pack.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a good life if you can do it. You keep moving.
Well, I mean, I think that you asked, what keeps me going. I think the idea of something new, I'm not a butterfly exactly, but that thing about, well, it's running, it's going okay, what's next is very much in my life. So lots of different projects, different ideas, finding different little dusty corners of klezmer that might need a bit of cleaning off and showing the light.
Well, that's great. What are some corners that you maybe that you dusted off a while ago and you see maybe they're actually a little more visible now? And what are some things that where did you find those? Like what parts of the repertoire or the world or whatever?
Well, the two that I got kind of really down and dirty with during COVID, when there was so much time to do things.
And you made a lot of things happen, I remember.
Well, yeah, I did an online festival, which I called the London International Klezmer Experience. And
I remember I did it from right over. I'm facing this way in the basement. I was facing 90 degrees that way, and we did it, yeah.
I had this amazing faculty because nobody had anything else to do, and I didn't have to pay their fares.
That's what I was telling all my students. I was like, it was like in this is like spring 2020, like April or May or something. And I kept telling, I had some students who were like, what do I do? What do I do? I was like, write the most famous, most unavailable person that you could ever think to try to get in contact with. Because I guarantee you, they don't have any gigs right now. And we don't know how long that's going to last. And it only lasted for that like top tier. It only lasted for like 4 months. And then they were all like, oh, I'm going to go do quarantine 2 weeks on either end to go. I remember this one person I went to college with who's like a serious chamber player, like classical violinist and violist. And she did a tour of Korea in a time where she had to quarantine before and after. And I was just like, I don't know how. That can't be. Is that worth it? I hope so. Probably was. But like also just like,
Oh, that was such a different time. So anyway, the two things you got deep into.
Oh no, but I made me think of something, which was that during COVID, it was one of the times I realized that people do have money. There are people out there with money who want to spend it on music. And during COVID, people were earning money and had nothing to spend it on. Some people still had jobs which they were doing from home, and they had all this money building up because they weren't going out. And so that was the ideal time to do like a crowdfunder, which is what I did for one of the projects, which was the Nigunim project, which
I remember, yeah.
So what I did was I bought the 5 CD, not CD-ROMs, but CD, a 5 CD collection of the Beregovsky books. So Moshe Beregovsky prepared 5 collections of music for publication during his lifetime, and none of them were ever published in full. And so he a lot of us are very sad about that. And, Volume 3 has been published, The Jewish Instrumental Folk Music by Kurtz and Michael Alpert and others.
People got to remember, that's only 20% of the whole thing.
Yeah, so there's 2 books of songs. There's the Nigunim and there's Purim Spiel, and there's something else as well, which I always forget. And so I had these on CD, his versions, if you like, the manuscripts. And so what I decided was that, although I'm not a singer, the Nigunim book was very underrepresented, and some of them had been published in different places, including in a Mark Slobin book some time ago. So I sort of envisaged this project called Beregovsky's Lost Treasures, and I decided the violin was the voice of the Jewish soul. So Nigunim could be played on the violin as much as you could sing them.
Of course.
And so I did the same thing. I went and asked all the klezmer fiddlers I could think of all around the world if they wanted to record a random sample that I would send them. So I sent them each 5 tunes and said, well, you can have an evening show. So every night for a month, I did an evening show with a different fiddler where they got an hour to talk about their practice. And so they come and talk about what they did. They play a couple of tunes. They might play a tune from this collection if they'd learnt it already. And then they would go away and record a video of themselves playing their version of this tune. And so we amassed not quite the whole 158 that were in the first part of the book, the Tish Nigunim, but quite a substantial number of them. And they're there as a collection online now. And so all I have to do is finish editing the book and then publish it. So that's one of the ongoing long-term things that you were talking about, that we do things slowly. So that's taking shape.
Some things are supposed to be slow. Some things, if you can do it fast, like bringing all those people together. Yeah, that's bringing me back to remember those times when I was like, I don't know what's going on, but, Ilana's not taking this sitting down.
Well, I loved the fact that I could open the computer and just be at one with the community. And I feel like we all got to know each other a lot better, no matter where we were in the world. All of a sudden, there we were translating things from the Yiddish or watching other people translate things from the Yiddish. And, there were all those little communities that built up where you could spend time with people that you hadn't really met properly before. And I definitely formed new relationships and friendships that, have inspired me and been valuable to this day.
Yeah, and it was kind of like what you're saying is there were ways to carve out your space that were new. Like there was, I watched a lot of people carve out sort of a space for themselves to find their place in the scene, especially around the KMDMP, the Kisselgoff Magnevetsky digitization thing, where you could really, you don't own it, but you could claim ownership of the work of having sort of translated this old piece of manuscript into the present day. And, people have, and it's really interesting watching, and full disclosure, I was in a different trip and I did not engage with that at all at the time. And maybe that was hubris. Maybe it was just, something. And so what happens is now people will come to me with these tunes and I don't know them, they're all new to me. And so it's this, and I just think it's really remarkable to watch younger people be like, oh, this is my stuff. Mm-hmm. Like this is my repertoire. And I'm like, whoa, that's probably how it felt for like Pete and all of us playing like Kostakowski tunes and German Goldenstein tunes. He's like, that's fine, but what about like the mid 40s Taras stuff that I care about, And to be fair, like we get to play all of that. Like you don't get to say, I mean, you can find your lane, but the best part about finding your lane is then you just have a place to come back to. You can go away, you can come back. It's like, it's really exciting. It's a really exciting time to be in klezmer music, and it sounds like you're really good at, finding some. I mean, realizing people had money to spend. That was brilliant. That's just
well, it was a desperation really, because I was like, I need to pay people, but because I can't ask them to do these things for nothing. But at the same time, I'm not earning any money, so where am I going to find it? So I just
goodness, I know.
And I think that thing about asking people, do you want to be a supporter? Do you just want to be standard, or do you want to be? That really started during that time, I think, where if you can pay a little extra, that will be great. People will really appreciate it, and if you can afford it, go for it. If you can't hardly pay anything, then we'll let you in anyway, because we want you there.
Well, that's one of the great things about this online stuff, is it's scalable in that way. It's like somebody taking a place in a Zoom is not taking a place away from somebody else, right?
Absolutely.
And as we pivot back to real, in-person stuff, and we've pivoted back and all that stuff, that sense of access is something that I've always felt like I wanted to preserve, and then you run into these material conditions that you didn't have, during like 2021, where you're like, oh, anybody can show up. I mean, I remember the same thing as, like, I was teaching a klezmer ensemble at Temple University. I did it for 4 semesters, and that was the second one. And it was like, it was amazing. My boss was like, hey, we have like just some money left around because no one's coming to campus. Do you want to have like $600 to pay some guest artists to come in? And we had this whole thing on Zoom, and this was something that, like, we were pushing it. We were pushing hard. I was like desperate to figure out a way to play fulfilling music within the limitations of what we had, which were severely limited at the time. And I'm sure they're still not great. Like, but I'm sure there's ways of playing, remotely that are much more, good. And I remember how powerful it felt just to be together in that time. It was just such a great thing to bring people together.
And also, it was a really good way to access the really younger people, school kids. So what I did was I tried to apply for some funding, and it didn't come through, of course, but people did it for free. And what I did was contact people who I knew were already interested in klezmer, or who I'd done projects with, who were teaching young people, and gave them a couple of tunes and got them to, and then we did an online workshop, with like Francesca and Josh Middleton, who's an accordionist. He's like the new Jim, really, the current Jim. And so to kind of infuse them in different ways, and their teachers kind of worked on the tunes with them, and then we did one of those little Zoom, where everybody was in their own window, and we edited it together. And that was just an incredible way, actually, to be working. So one of them had a folk band, a like teen folk band. So they had electric guitars, and they had a really funny collection of instruments at their high schools, and they were all on Zoom. And then there was another one, which was a little string band, up north in Lancashire. So it was really sweet, and we came up with this really nice video. And one of them was an inner city project, actually, in London. I'd done some training work with 2 of their staff, and they contributed some children as well. So it's really diverse. And I would say probably there were hardly any Jewish kids actually involved, because the teachers were actually working with non-Jewish kids. So it's a way of spreading the love. And certainly in the UK at the moment, there's a lot of people who are interested in that kind of inter-community, positive representation of Jewishness, that kind of thing.
There's that Jewishness again. I think this is what we need. Like, let's lean into it. We don't have to worry about, like, honestly, Judaism is where it is. It's a little messy. It's a little dangerous, it's a little crazy. I struggle with it a lot, but on the other hand, I always have, right? That's why I play klezmer music. Like, I respect somebody who's always felt at home inside of the institution, for instance. But like, there's all this other stuff, I think that I'm glad you brought that up, because there's all these people who go like, I feel adrift. Maybe I'm Jewish, or maybe I'm around a lot of Jews. I feel adrift. I don't know what to think. I'm confused. I have nothing I feel like I'm not standing on any solid ground. And I'm like, cool. Like, I don't. I feel like I've got solid ground under my feet. I feel like I know who my people are, and I feel like I know where I come from or could come from, because, you know, almost every single one of us who have claimed this repertoire, like you mentioned, your family's not from Ukraine, like, we claimed it as our own and we did something with it. It didn't come to, it wasn't like passed down. It's not in our blood, you know? And even if it is, it still isn't. It's like the work is in our bones because we did the work, you know? And I'm like, hey, there's all this stuff that's just, you do some work with it, you're going to feel different, you know? I mean, you mentioned you came out of this like from a left-wing perspective. Like, do you feel, how does that strike you, I guess, would be the great place to start.
How does it strike me? How?
Just like the idea that, like, having dealt with all this Yiddish culture for so many years, it's just like grounding, you know?
I think
it's like you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that, you know, some of the best klezmer musicians aren't Jewish, but they're attracted to the culture because of the music. You know, the music draws them in. And I know it's a cliche to say that music is a universal language and it doesn't have words and people respond, but, you know, you really do see it, don't you? And perhaps it's because of the way we play it. It's just not just unsa, 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 you know, it's we play it with our whole kavona and you know, we go deep in, and maybe that's what people are responding to when they hear it and really want to do it too. But the left-wing thing, I suppose, means that I did have to find a different way to be Jewish. And when I found a community, it's a bit like in early music in a way, because it's people who are looking for something a bit different from the mainstream, I think.
Right.
Musically, as it turns out, quite often politically, but, you know, we're a diverse community politically as well, of course. And I do think at the moment it has made things really hard and really polarized. And some people you talk to and some people you don't, and some people you know that you have things in common with more than others. And some things you talk about and some things you don't. And some people you love, even though, you know, they think differently, and it's not going to stop. And some people think differently and you're not going to love them anymore. I think, you know, we've all been in those boxes. It's a slightly interesting story. A lot of people, because of Brexit, you know, we've had this Brexit problem here. I mean, we do feel we have felt very lonely because people don't want to tour here and it's expensive to be in the UK and you've got all these new visa stuff. And a lot of us have been looking for ways to be European again. And I discovered a route, well, somebody helped me discover a route, which is via, I have Spanish citizenship as of very recently, last November, and my passport is now ready to collect. And it's because my grandfather went as a left-wing person to fight Franco in Spain.
Wow.
He was part of the International Brigade, and I'm spreading his memories, as is my duty as a Spanish citizen who got her nationality this way. And so it was kind of a thank you to the descendants of those volunteers who went and fought fascism in Spain. And
that's so cool.
Jewish Socialist magazine asked me to write an article about it and how I was grateful for it and how it made me feel and how it happened. And one of the things they said was, well, write about how they were Jewish and went. And one of the things is that it's a bit like, you know, Pete, it was just what he did. They were Jews and they went to fight fascism. It wasn't because they were Jewish per se. You know, the background was it was the 30s, you know. Anti-Semitism was the dominant form of racism in the UK because there weren't that many brown people, you know, and the establishment was anti-Semitic, you know, everybody was anti-Semitic. So it was the environment they were in. It wasn't to do with being Jewish or so. I can't remember what we were talking about, but it relates back to what we're saying about the being left-wing and the things you do and the music you make.
Yeah, and you get to feel strong, I guess I would say, in where you are, in your position, which is, and you get, like, you know, we were talking about this before we started recording, like, we're trying to talk about reality here, you know, we're not trying to mythologize, you know, that's another style of klezmer music that I don't participate in, but it's
this is about reality. It's about music that happened, music that is happening, the culture that happened around it, how that can feed the culture that is happening around it. You know, we all stand on the shoulders of the people who did that work before us, right? And in our lives. And it's like, yeah, come. And I always say, like, come hang. Like, the door's open. That's the other thing about the klezmer scene is, like, the door's wide open. Just come hang and find a roost for yourself. Like, look at how many people have done it. You don't have to be Jewish. No, I mean, I'll never forget, we played, I think it was a bar mitzvah ceremony at Klez Canada, and Christian David was leading the band. And in traditional Christian style, who's a very meticulous fellow, he knew every piece of synagogue music that I had grown up with. And I was like, why did you learn? Like, you didn't need to learn that, you know? And he's like, I was just really interested. And I'm like, man, like, I trust that, you know, that really, as a Jewish guy who, you know, like, we live in this world where you have to face what people are doing in the name of Judaism, and you have to face how people are reacting to that, and also whatever they were doing before. There's a great Jewish Currents podcast episode with two activists from England, and this one guy he talks about the reservoir of anti-Semitism that's something that gets dipped into when the conditions are right, and it's like, oh, you know, that's happening to us for sure. How do we? What if there was a way to feel a little more comfort in it? Because you just know that this stuff exists. You know, these people have put in the work, because that's the other thing. Putting in the work is undeniable in a way. Like, you've done the work and it stays.
Yeah.
And you've done the work.
Well, I was just going to tell one more little, not an anecdote, but one last piece of work, which was during COVID, I was online and just, you know, listening around as you do, YouTube, this and that. And I came across some names of klezmorim that I hadn't heard before. And I thought, well, it sounds like the klezmer music I'm listening to. It sounds like Taras, it sounds like Ranvai, you know, obviously they don't sound the same. But I was like, the language is there, the accent is there. What is this stuff? And it turned out that it was music recorded in Buenos Aires in the 40s, 50s, hard to tell from the records. And I went deeper and I contacted somebody I'd met at Festival in Brazil, who is Zulema Benveniste, who is a singer who lives in Buenos Aires. And we did some research together. We talked to some old people who had nothing to do because they were stuck at home. And we found this whole, you know, repertoire of music, that some of which was composed by these guys that nobody plays yet. So there's a whole nother corner. But I, of course, realized that I'm not Argentinian. I don't really know much about the history, you know, the bare bones. But there is one of the Yiddish sort of institute-y type things that's doing a course about Jewish Argentina very soon, so I can educate myself. So, you know, that thing about other communities understanding the history and going a little deeper to understand where the musicians were coming from, I think is a good point that you're making there, and anybody can do it.
Yeah, you're doing the work, you're going to do the work. And the other thing that strikes me is that there's plenty of work to do. You know, I didn't know about that. You figured it out. Like, you just figured out another sort of corner that was maybe, you know, didn't have a spot that deserves a spotlight or whatever. So that's, well done, Ilana, all the way around. And as we sort of move to a close, like, so that's one of the things you're thinking about now. What else is coming up? What else is on your plate? What do you want people, and then how can people follow you, get in touch with you? Where's the best way to get engaged with your work?
Well, I'm working on a new festival, of course. We've got, because there's no, there was a new regime at the Jewish Music Institute, and they decided to cut Klezfest again, as well as
Where have I heard that before?
As well as the Yiddish and song schools. We decided, I was invited by somebody who had decided to start another festival to help with that. So we're doing that this summer, called Sommerfest, and everybody's welcome. We would love more international participation. We do have people coming from abroad, and that's going to be in London. And I'm slowly plodding along with the Book of Nigunim, and we're going to have a concert to do with that this summer. In the longer term, I want to publish some of this Buenos Aires stuff. I'm not sure about recording. All the things you were saying about recording are true, and I'm thinking, well, maybe we can use some of the old recordings and assemble those in one place. But it would be nice to record some of those tunes. They're great tunes. And some of the other music they played that we know already, but just that they played there. Just interesting aside, one of the things that I realized is that what we call Bulgar, they call share still. So they say play the shares.
That's great. And in Philly, it's a Freilach. So as you well know, because you helped edit Susan's family's book.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just did a really lovely little library presentation where it was sort of like a nature walk through the book. And we were the band playing after each one. It was very cute. I hope we get to do it again.
That sounds wonderful.
And so online...
Yeah, online, ilanacravitz.com. Please do look at the website, because I've got a whole section about klezmer, which has like each instrument with some old recordings and the names of the people who are playing those instruments now. So it was another thing that I started during COVID, because I had all this information that I wanted to put somewhere. And people can, of course, buy my book, Klezmer Fiddle, a how-to guide.
Yeah,
not just for fiddles, and it has pull-outs for second violin and bass, which Stu Brotman helped me with at the time.
Awesome.
It's quite an old book now, but it's still the only one of its kind. It has a play-along CD, and I can provide B-flat versions of the tunes and E-flat and bass clef. So little advert there.
Yeah.
And then just gigging, thinking about new projects, things. I'm very interested in doing things just with bass, or just with kind of funky, where you just have a fiddle and you have to imagine the stuff in the middle. So my most recent thing was something we called the Klezmer Village Band, which was fiddle and clarinet and double bass. And so everybody had to work quite hard to create the impression that there was a trombone in the middle. Maybe all we need is you, Dan.
I'm there. We'll figure it out. Yeah, Ilana, you were doing the work. You have done the work. You're still doing the work. And you're holding it down out in the, in the aisles. And thank you. And it's great to hear more about everything that you've done and are doing. Check her out. The resources are vast and deep. She's not kidding around. She's really putting a lot and has offered a lot to all of us. And we're not kidding around. Her website's a great entry point. Just come and join us. We'll have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's right.
We're waiting. Where are you?
That's right. I'm waiting. All right. We'll see you there.
Thanks, Dan.
My pleasure. Well, that was my conversation with violinist, festival organizer, teacher, producer of really useful and great klezmer books, and a whole lot more, Ilana Cravitz. I had a really fun time talking with Ilana. It feels like someone who, it's like getting to meet somebody in your family who your family, but you don't get to talk to a lot. And then you have a lot in common, but you just haven't gotten to say it out loud. And that's kind of how this conversation felt like, which, like I said in the intro, classic. This is classically like right in the bullseye of what I want this podcast to be. Just a hang, just a place to like really get into what we care about, what we're like way too nerdy about, and to share that with all of you, that you can be, as Daniel Kahn once said, the fly on the wall who wants to sit and interject into this conversation that they are so excited by. But it's a podcast. But you can always leave us a review or leave us a comment or tell us what you think or what you want from us. We probably can't do it, but we'll try, and we really appreciate you for listening. So that's it. We've got more episodes. We got a lot in the can. We got a good roll going. We're keeping to our once a month-ish schedule best we can. I'm really excited about some of the conversations that I've already had recorded that I get to share with you all soon. So continue to support us if you can. Please share this widely, and I hope it's just really useful for you in your own klezmer or otherwise musical or Jewish journey. That's it. So thanks so much for listening, and have a good Shabbos.